Hey, welcome. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. I appreciate you checking us out. Hey, would you take a few minutes to do me a big favor? It won't take you long, but I would love it. I would absolutely love it if you would reach out on iTunes and just give this a positive, favorable rating. If you like it, if you like the podcast, would you reach out? Those ratings help me as a podcast provider, and it helps us get a little more exposure, that sort of thing. So I would love it if you would take a few minutes if you are a fan of the podcast and what we provide. Again, thank you for taking a few minutes to do that. I would love it if you would give us a positive rating, hopefully a 5, but hey, I'm asking for honesty. And a comment would be even better. So if you could leave a positive comment and a rating on iTunes, I would love that. Thank you, folks. We are on episode 21. Today we're going to be talking about reaching out to a school for a new job. So I realize some of you, you're never going to leave your position. You're going to die in the job you're in. You might not want to listen any further. But I do know a whole lot of you appreciate what I bring to the table in regards to helping with the job search process. I take a lot of pride in what we do to help coaches with the job search process. I know that I got on this in 2011. I was fired from a job, asked to resign, whatever you want to say, from a position, not for anything I did wrong, just superintendent I was working for at a private school wanted to change directions. And so we did that. And 7 years ago, I think I was 35 years old. I had never really had to apply for a job, and I had done some job hunting, but really was in a bind for the first time ever with, having to put together basically every job until then. I kind of knew I had it before I applied to it, if that makes sense. And so in 2011, when I was looking for help in the area of, portfolio, cover letter, resume, as a football coach, there really wasn't a lot out there. So that's kind of how I got into this business of helping others. And I love it. I enjoy it. So enjoy podcast 21 here, the Coach's Locker Podcast. We're going to talk about reaching out to the athletic director. We're going to talk about kind of what to send that athletic director. We're also going to hit on a few other pieces of, reaching out to a school and figuring out what's the best way to approach that school. And I'm going to talk specifically about 6 things an athletic director looks for on a resume. Okay, so there we have it. That's what I'm going to hit on tonight. And again, thank you for checking out the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it. So, cool story. The guy who wrote that song, okay, he's a former player of mine. His name's Richie. And Richie is in Nashville right now. He is pursuing his dream. Richie Martin Simoes. Okay? That song is called California Ride. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But he's out in Nashville pursuing his dream to be a country music artist. And he's playing on a lot of different sets or with a lot of different bands, doing some gigs on the side and recording music and doing a lot of that cool stuff, which is pretty neat. But Richie came in. He's from Brazil, actually. Played for me. He was a running back, played some linebacker. He was a better offensive player. But, I knew he had a lot of potential, even though he'd never played football before, really. And I knew he had a ton of potential. So, I'm the type of coach, I'm going to ride you if I see that potential. So I rode that kid really hard. And he thought that, but he just wasn't reaching that potential, right? So he thought I was riding him because I didn't like him or something like that, or I didn't think he was going to make it, or I was trying to push him out of the program. So he came in the office one day. It's just a really good lesson, to learn. And he said, I need you to tell me something. Yes, Richie, what's up? I need you to know, do you believe in me? He's got a little Brazilian accent, which I just tried to fake, but not even close. But I said, yeah, man, I do. I believe in you, of course. And he's like, then you need to act like it. It was a good lesson for me because I'm like, what do you mean I need to act like it? And he says, Coach, I'm a kid, and I need to know that my coach believes in me. And you're all over me, and you're pushing me, and you're telling me I can do it, but I don't know if you really believe in me. Do you believe in me? Because if you don't believe in me, I'm done. I'm going to quit. And so we had a great discussion. We actually ended up both, in some tears, and it was a very, very positive moment for me as a coach and for him as a player, I think. But it took a little while to, work through some of that stuff. But anyway, he sent me that song a couple years ago, and I just fell in love with it. I think it's a great song. He wrote it about being on the coast, man. We're so blessed here in California. And I loved it. So I asked him if I could use it for this podcast, and he said, yeah, but there you go. I think some country guy is going to make it big with that song someday. So anyway, that's my buddy Richie. I've been able to visit him a couple times. One of those, I was out there for the AFCA conference a few years ago and got to go have some of that barbecue with Richie once, and then another time I was out there for a wedding with a friend and got to see him again. So it was a lot of fun. Nashville is a great place. All right, let's talk about reaching out to a school, okay? And, kind of how to go about that. In fact, today, if you follow me on Twitter, I just happened today to write, I tweeted out something. I get a lot of questions about reaching out to athletic directors or principals, like when you should do that type of deal. And this guy sent me a message, and he said, hey, Chris, I know they're going to be making a change at the school. There's a school I'd love to coach at. I think they're going to be making a change. They're not a very successful program. Should I reach out to them? And I said, no, not yet. I think if you reach out to them, too soon, I think that that might not just be the best thing to do. I think you want to at least wait until the season's over. You might get on the bad side of an athletic director, I think, if you reach out too soon to see, what's going on with that job or what have you, because, athletic directors and principals or whoever might be making that decision, they're under a lot of pressure. Their jobs are very busy. If the football season is not going well, they're probably already hearing about that from boosters or parents or kids or community members. And so the last thing you want to do is get on their bad side, real quickly, because you think they're going to be making a change, and you want to, get your name and resume out there to them real soon. I don't think that that's the best thing to do, so I advise against it. Unless you have a really good relationship or something like that with the principal or with the athletic director, I would stay away from reaching out to them too quickly like that. That's my advice on that. But all right, one of the first things you want to do is make sure that you are able to stay organized with your contacts. Okay, develop a system. I really like to use Microsoft Excel. Stay organized. I applied for 170 something. I think it was 176 jobs in 2011. Now you're saying, what the puke? But folks, I applied. I was looking for part-time work. Okay. I was looking for anything that would help me find a new job. I was looking basically from Texas west out to California. I applied. Out of those 176, probably 80 or 90 of them were jobs in education. And so, there was one on there, though, a gas station manager. I was looking for anything. I was informed pretty late, in the spring that I would not be returning. And so they kept me on to train the new athletic director, which was nice. So I had a few months, like 3 months to, kind of look for a job before I knew my income would be drying up. And obviously, anytime you leave a job, you're asked to resign. That's very hard to explain in an interview. And so, I wasn't able to land a job in education right away. And so it took me a little while, to find a new job. So I got a job driving a taxi, which was a lot of fun, to be honest with you, all over San Diego County. But, it did not pay the bills, boy. I spent 12 hours in that taxi one time for $40. So when you're working 12-hour shift for $40, you are not loving very much of your life. I'll tell you that. It was very, very depressing some nights in that cab. But you got to do what you got to do to make some money for the family. So anyhow, I applied for all kinds of jobs, right? Everything. So one of the things I did, though, to stay organized is I created an Excel spreadsheet. Far left-hand side had date and then school, the school I was applying to. I didn't do this for all the non-school jobs, but just for the school jobs. So I went date, school, position, head football coach, teacher, whatever it was, dean. Okay, date, school, position, the contact person. Where did that application go to? Again, this was in 2011. I would say back then half of them were, probably more, 60, 70% were all just online applications you did. But even back then, 7 years ago, this was 2011, quite a few places were still hard copy, resumes and applications or what have you. So having that contact person is key. I always tell coaches, when you apply to a job, it's also, I'm an assistant principal currently. I'm recording this here in October 21st, 2018, and I'm an assistant principal. And even when I just applied, to this job late in last spring, early summer, I applied to the job, but then I also reached out to the principal with my resume and I tell coaches this all the time, guys. It's a really good idea to do that because although you apply through, like in California, we have a website called EdJoin, right? So you apply to the job through EdJoin, but that is going usually to, an administrative assistant, a secretary, whatever you might call them, some HR person, and that HR person is, filtering through and sorting out all of these applications and resumes and all that paperwork. You never know how many of those she's getting, probably a whole lot of them. You never know specifically, what that person's going to be looking for compared to what the principal might be looking for. So I absolutely, most definitely advise folks all the time that, yes, fill out the regular job board application, okay, but also reach out to the principal and or the athletic director, depending on, the job you're going for. But if you're going for a coaching job, if you're going for an offensive coordinator job and you got to apply through an online system, send everything you sent for that, also send in to the head coach, okay? If you're applying for a head coach job, use that online system, but then reach out to the athletic director and or principal, It's important that you kind of get to know who's heading up this job search. In some schools it's the principal, in some schools it's AD, in some schools it's a tag team between those two. So you really got to do some homework and figure that out. But you definitely don't just want to apply. Last time I hired a basketball coach here in California, I had 100 applications. Okay, 100 applications. And so those all came in through our online system called EdJoin, as I referred to earlier. Okay, but out of those 100, maybe only 7 or 8 directly reached out to me as well. And so when they reached out to me, what do you think that did to me, the athletic director? That put their resume in front of me. It kind of forced me to take a look at it. When it goes through those 100 people through the secretary who's just getting all these emails and putting them in a file,
I might not ever see that resume. She might be just looking for, okay, does this guy have varsity coaching experience? So obviously we developed a system. I'm not going to get into that, but we developed a system of which ones I would see and which ones I wouldn't see at that school. Some of that was based on superintendent principal feedback and what they wanted, as minimum qualifications. But I'll tell you this, out of those 7, 3 of the 5 we brought in for an interview reached out to me directly. Man, Tyreek Hill, this kid is so fast. I'd love to have him as a punt returner. I'm watching this Cincinnati KC game right now. So definitely reach out, with a copy of all your stuff. So date, school, position, contact person. What's their email? What's their phone number? That's another column. My next column over is resume sent, with a question mark, and then application is the application with a question mark. Did I do that? And then, okay, so columns again, date, school, position, contact person, email, phone, resume, application, and then follow-up was one of my next column. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 follow-up, and then 10 I had interview with a question mark. So that's kind of the spreadsheet that I use to stay very organized, okay? And I encourage you to create this type of spreadsheet so that you can keep your contacts organized in your job search. It can get very confusing depending on, where you are, how many schools you might be applying to. You might know, no, dude, I'm applying for that head coach job. If it comes open, I'm applying there. If it doesn't, I'm staying put. Well, you don't need to organize your contacts like this. But if you're out job hunting, I'd really encourage you to stay organized with your contacts, something, okay, like that. All right, let's talk about 5 keys to contacting the athletic director. 5 keys to contacting the athletic director. Number 1, you want to make sure to follow the directions. Follow the directions of the job post. If it says do not contact the AD, then I implore you, if it says do not call, no phone calls. If it says do not call, folks, do not call, okay? Because what that's going to do is it's going to put you in a negative light, okay? If you decide that you want to call that place, even though it says not to, you're going to look kind of silly calling them, and you're going to go on a red list. That's what I did. I would put that right on a list of mine, don't hire this guy. Because he's told you not to contact anybody, don't contact him. Okay? If it tells you, specifically send resume, cover letter, portfolio, no letters of recommendation, don't send any letters of recommendation. So the first key in contacting an AD is follow the directions. It's so important, okay? The second key to contacting an AD, obviously you're going to want to send your resume. Something you may or may not know, okay, about me is I help coaches with the resume process. We have got a very unique way that we help coaches get into the interview room. And that's where I want to get you. I want to get you into the interview room, okay, so that you can have a great shot at getting that job. And so one of the things I started in 2012 was helping coaches build their resume, because here's the deal. There's a lot of outfits out there. There's a lot of groups, mainly in the business world, the professional world, who will help you build resumes. And I've talked to a lot of coaches who have gone out and spent $300, $350, $400 with some company they found online or LinkedIn that have rave reviews because they were able to get a CEO of a, Coca-Cola company a job, or, some grocery store manager position at, the corporate offices or something like that. But folks, do not waste a dime on one of these folks who has a professional resume writing business that doesn't know coaching, because I've developed a system that helps coaches stand out with their resume to get into that interview room. And I'm not going to get into that here today. We're not doing a whole thing on resumes. We'll touch on resumes a little later this podcast. Okay, and obviously I'm not going to give you my secret or else you're not going to become a customer, right? That'd be dumb. But your resume is key. I charge $149, okay, for your resume. And the process I use, you'll send me your first draft, you'll send me your resume. Okay, I'll lock that into a special, unique format that we use. Okay, that format is something you've probably never used before. The formatting I do is key. Okay, and the formatting is an attention grabber. And I then send you a 25-minute conference call that I had with a coach on on the next step, on how we make these resumes great. I send that to you with your first draft. Okay, you're going to get that phone call, and you're going to go through now and build out what I tell you to look for. You're going to have to do a little research to make this resume great, okay? And then you send that research back to me, and I've done 15 versions and draft for some coaches who keep sending me stuff. Others, they send me all their stuff. I put it in a final. I send it to them. I never hear from them again. So, anyhow, that's $149. You can go to 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org, 8laces.org/resume, RUSUME again. Okay, 8laces.org/resume. And you'll see a lot of coaches who have come through who have used me, up to a Division II head football coach, Division I head basketball coach. Yes, Division I head basketball coach who is he spent 10 years as a Division I head basketball coach in a Big Ten school, mind you. And then stepped down. He's been an assistant coach the last few years, and now he's trying to get back into being a head coach. And he contacted me and he said, "Are you serious that you developed these resumes for this much money?" I said, "Yes." And he said, I spent $800 with an executive resume maker last fall, and her resume she developed for me was awful. You only charge this much money? So I said, "Yes, I do." So it's a steal, folks. I'm telling you that. $149 investment. You will have this resume for the rest of your life. The rest of your life, you will have a tremendous resume. Dan Mullen, head coach at Florida, said, if you want to get into coaching to be a GA, send resumes out everywhere. It will get to the head coach. We have a GA and a quality control file. Every email I get, I throw them in that. Then when it comes time to look for someone, I open up that file. Okay, very interesting. Bill Bradshaw, athletic director at Temple University. Make sure everything on your resume is honest, accurate, complete, and it stands out. Spend a lot of time on that part. The portfolios and everything else can come later. You will see some tremendous responses from coaches who I've done the resumes for. For instance, Corey Chamberlain, an NFL veteran, 3-time Grey Cup champion up in Canada, said, Chris totally transformed my resume in a timely and professional manner. His resume building skills are a valuable resource for coaches looking to take their resume to the next level. Okay, so Ian Shoemaker, the head football coach at Central Washington University, NCAA Division II school. When the right job opened for me, I looked for the best support person I could find to make sure I would get an interview. Chris was able to help me organize my resume and supported me in producing an infographic that got my foot in the door. Thank you, Chris. So I could go on and on reading things for you. I'm not going to do that. Go to 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org, and then /resume, 8laces.org /resume. Again, resumes are $149. That's the standard 7 business day turnaround. If you need one a little quicker, and I do a 2-day turnaround, it is right above $200, but my time is valuable just as yours is. So that's second thing you'll need, obviously, is a resume when you contact the AD. Make sure it's great. Third thing you'll need is a cover letter. Again, something else that I do provide, and I help coaches write a cover letter. But really, I think that, I really think most coaches can do a decent job writing a cover letter. Some feel horrible about it. In a lot of cases, folks, that cover letter is huge. I know I worked with a superintendent. That cover letter was more important than the resume because he read that cover letter. He read that entire thing. And if that cover letter wasn't dialed in, and if you didn't get his attention to that cover letter, he would not even get to your resume. Okay? But that's the third thing you want to send is a cover letter. The fourth thing you want to send is a coaching portfolio. If you haven't listened to episode 20, we did episode 20 last week of Coach's Locker podcast. It was all about the coaching portfolio. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. And then check out coachingportfolio.com. So somebody on the internet, somebody on Twitter asked, what's the difference between a resume and a portfolio? So I felt a little bad for that coach because if you don't know that difference, you're going to have a really hard time finding a job. But the resume is, that is a representation of your jobs that you've had, okay? You have bullet points for each of those. Again, I create dynamic bullet points using a system you've probably never thought of to make you really stand out as a position coach, as a coordinator, as a head coach. And so we develop a resume that shows where you've been, when you've been there, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's your resume. Most of you know what a resume is. Then your coaching portfolio is, somewhere between, I don't know. A lot of people ask how long it needs to be. Honestly, I think if you're going to look for a head coach job, that thing needs to be at least 30 or 40 pages. Mine's right around 100 pages, okay? And if you look, a lot of people ask, what should I include in that? Again, I've got a manual called the Outside the Lines Manual on 8laces.org. I'm not telling you to go buy it right now. What I'm telling you is go look at that because that's my own coaching portfolio. I took my portfolio and turned it into a dynamic resource called Outside the Lines Coaching Manual that anybody can purchase and then use as their own. I just took off the names of my school, but what I'm trying to tell you here is go to 8laces.org and look at the Outside the Lines Manual. I list all the documents that are in my portfolio, and that's 105 pages. Practice schedules, okay? Practice week schedules, scouting forms, recruiting forms, help your kids get recruited, a letter to an 8th grader about being removed from a team, a letter to a fundraiser trying to secure funds, equipment checkout lists, coaching responsibilities. I mean, a list could go on and on and on, okay, about what you need in that coaching manual or coaching portfolio, okay? The next thing you want when you contact AD for a job, obviously, you want to have letters of recommendation. And what I do all the time, I tell coaches, these letters of recommendation, you want to have a quiver. Okay, because a lot of people always ask, how many do I send? Now with the digital age, everything's a PDF. Send a lot of them. Send 5 or 6. I've got probably 25 letters of recommendation for myself in my file, in my employment file. Okay, they're all electronic. They're all scanned in. They're all PDFs. I do not send all 25 out when I'm looking for a new job. Okay. I will send out 5 to 7 that I think are the most appropriate for that position. For instance, when I applied for this assistant principal job I'm in right now, I did not send the letters. I've got some letters, some really, really great letters from some parents of kids I coached. I'm not going to send those letters of recommendation from a parent of a kid I coached in football when I'm going for an assistant principal job, obviously, right? I'm not going to put in, a letter from my athletic director who supervised me, basically suggesting me as a football coach. I'm not going to send that in for an assistant principal job. I'm going to send in some of my letters from principals I've worked for because those are going to hold a lot of weight, okay? So you just have to kind of pick and choose, but try to get a quiver. Again, I've been in education since 2001 to 2018. And I've got about 25 different letters. I got them from a wide variety of people, okay? And then I just keep those in my file, and I'll send those out, as I feel necessary. Another little thing I'll do sometimes is I'll include 5 or 7 in my online application. And then when I reach out to the principal, I might send him 2 more. For instance, this last assistant principal job, when I emailed him directly, I sent him a letter of recommendation I have from Rob Wygod. If you're in the southern section, you know who Rob is. He's the commissioner of our governing body here in Southern California. So, and I know my principal I'm working for, he saw that and he really liked that letter. So you just kind of have to pick and choose. So there's 5 keys to contacting the AD. Follow the directions. Send your resume, your cover letter, your coaching portfolio, and then 5 to 7 letters of recommendation. Okay, those are the ideas that I think you need to put into a packet to reach out about that job. Let me give you 4 pieces of advice about your resume before we wrap this up. Okay, I'm going to go about 10 or 12 more minutes here. Again, I appreciate you listening. But let's talk about 4 pieces of advice for your resume. Number 1, do your homework. Okay? Make sure you do a very good job representing yourself on that resume. Okay? Your resume, a lot of times coaches, and this is where, again, I'm not going to give you all my secrets to building a great resume. Okay, but a lot of times coaches have the same lame old bullet points, right? I was a linebackers coach. Bullet point 1, responsible for teaching the linebackers on a daily basis. Well, no crap. It'll say head football coach, first bullet point, responsible for the overall management of the football program. Folks, those are absolutely trash, garbage bullet points that do not tell me anything. Okay, so make sure you do your homework as you sit down and put together your resume. Okay, think about all the things you did at that school as a part of your job. Okay, so do your homework as you put together that resume. Number 2, 4 pieces of advice we're going over real quick here. Folks, proofread your resume, please. Proofread your resume. So many guys out there do an awful job with this, okay? They do not proofread their resume. So I've seen awful resumes where guys had so many misspelled words, so many different grammatical errors, so many different misspellings, so many different bullet points that were inaccurate, or bullet points that weren't lined up, sentences that were cut off. Man, it is awful. Or another thing I've seen is where it'll say like, okay, I was at this school from 2010 to 2014, okay? And then it'll say, in 2017, we led the league in blah, blah, blah. Folks, I just look up a little, just right above that. It doesn't say anything about you being there in 2017. So what in the world? I don't get it. Oh, boy. Bengals. The Bengals just screwed up big time looks like they were trying to do a little fake punt. And that was ugly. That was ugly. And so make sure to proofread that resume, okay? That is absolutely key, because what you'll want to make sure is that it is perfect. Have a few different people look at it, okay? Have a few different people look at it. Because if different people look at it, it's going to, hopefully, any mistakes will be found. Okay? And having different eyes on it makes it so that the same person isn't looking at it all day, every day. Okay? You want to really make sure that you can go take that resume maybe to an English teacher on campus, have them look at it. I think it's important that you take a look at that, okay? And then let's talk about the next thing here on your resume. As far as your resume, have an easy to follow format. I have a format that I use now for my customers, my clients. The format is very, very good because it's a very easy to read format, and it keeps the reader's eyes on the paper. And so you got to make sure your format is dialed in, and it's readable, it's digestible. I see some where I look at the resume and I don't even want to get into it. I don't want to read any of it because it's just so nasty looking. And so if it's not a clean looking resume, the reader's not going to want to read it.
So make sure that your resume is dialed in, easy to follow. Okay, some guys have like so much junk on their resumes, it's totally unneeded and unnecessary. Simple is better. Again, make sure to use an easy to follow format. And then 4, you need to brag about yourself, okay? And this is where we do a really good job with our resume building. A lot of guys are, say, oh, I don't want to brag about myself on my resume. I'm not really that type of guy. But you have got to brag about yourself. If there's a place to brag about yourself, it's on your resume, okay? Failure, if you don't brag about yourself, somebody else will. If you don't brag about yourself on your resume, somebody else will brag about themselves and then get that job, okay? So do your homework, proofread your resume, make sure it's an easy-to-use format, and brag about it, okay? Brag about yourself. So one of the things that I've seen consistently on resumes, okay, and I'll give you a few pointers here, just a few free pointers for you today. Don't waste any space. Do not waste any space. Listen, here's one of the things that drives me crazy on resumes. Take off the summary or the objective, okay? The summary, the objective, take that off. The summary or the objective, for instance, to obtain the head coaching position at WXY school. The reason you had a summary on there 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and people have just kept them on, okay? But you don't need that on there anymore because almost every job you apply to is electronic. So you apply to a job electronically, right? And that job, you don't need to say, hey, I'm applying for the head football coach job on your resume because that's going into a job application computer-based system. They know why they're getting your resume. So the summary, the objective was on there when you would walk around at trade shows or you'd walk around at a coaching clinic, okay? And sure, you still pass those out nowadays, but I just think it's absolutely wasted space to have your summary on there, okay? In 2018, you don't need to have your summary anymore. So get that off there. Now, maybe you have to secure a linebackers coach position, so that the head coach you're passing them out to at a conference sees linebackers up there. But I would even do that in a different way. So don't put a summary. You don't need your summary objective anymore on there. Draw attention to the title. And this, again, is where we have success with our clients. A lot of guys don't know how to build their resume so that it gets attention. You want to draw attention to your title, not the years, not the school, okay? That's one of the big mistakes is a lot of people draw attention to the school that they were at instead of the title. You want to draw attention to the title, okay? However you do that, bold it out, make it bigger, use a different font. Okay, but I want to be able, as a reader of that resume, I don't want to have to look for what's important. I want you to show me what's important. So draw attention to your title, not the years, not the location. Okay, and make sure that, like some coaches, they'll divide up their teaching and their coaching under the same title. So they'll have, 2014 to present, OC, offensive coordinator / history teacher at XYZ high school. And then they'll list a whole bunch of things for football, and then under that, a whole bunch of things for teaching. But it gets really convoluted and kind of confusing. Be careful not to do that. You want to keep all your bullet points kind of the same under that heading that you use, that title that you use. Okay. The other thing I'll see is, one of the other big mistakes, guys will use 15 bullet points for 1 or 2 years. That's just not very smart to do. I've literally written a resume for a 35-year veteran junior college coach. 35 years. In 35 years, he was at like 18 different schools. Folks, we used 1 or 2 bullet points for that guy for each job. So you got to be careful on the bullet points. Your bullet points really are the lifeline of your resume. And again, that's where we have a lot of success with our clients. When you say increase school, here I'm looking at a resume right now. Increase school enrollment through an active recruiting campaign. That's a lame bullet point. It tells me how. I mean, anybody could say that. Initiate an innovative fundraising effort to help boost the economic position of the program. Again, anybody can make that claim. Prove it. Prove that you did those things. Okay, that's what's real important. I'm looking at another resume here in my pile online where this guy spent his whole first page, okay? He doesn't get to his experience until the very bottom 1/8 of the page. So he has name is huge, wasted space, objective, a little more wasted space, education. Folks, when I do education, I get your whole education, like for each degree you have, on just 2 lines. 2 lines for each degree. Folks, you don't need to write what your GPA was. Do you honestly think a principal really cares what your GPA was? Or does he just care that you have your bachelor's degree? I see guys writing like, hey, I was part of this honor roll or graduated with my fraternity, 3rd in my fraternity class. Guys, that stuff does not matter anymore. I know in high school they told us all that stuff mattered, right? That stuff doesn't matter in the real world. It really doesn't. Okay? Put your, again, I get all that, your each degree on 2 lines. This guy writes major, elementary education, minor, teaching middle school science, major GPA, 3.5. You don't need all that baloney. He uses 5 lines for his bachelor's degree, okay? Don't need it. And then he puts his high school. That's another thing. Don't put your high school on your resume. Totally, totally unnecessary. Unless you're applying to that high school, unless you're applying to your alma mater, you do not need your high school on there, period. Period, paragraph. Very passionate about that. There's no reason to have your high school on there. And then he lists certifications on the front page under education. Folks, don't do that. Put your certifications much later in your resume, okay? So resumes can be very difficult. They can be very confusing to put together. Folks, invest $149. I'm not getting rich off this, trust me. Okay? I've got a very good paying job. This is something I do at night, on the weekends, to help coaches. But I'm just telling you, I'm going to have too much business this off season. I really do. In fact, I raised my resume rates $20 this year because I was too busy last year. So I'm not sitting here begging for your business. I'm just telling you, if you don't hire me, find somebody who can help you develop a dynamite resume. But be careful not to go just hire some executive guy who doesn't understand coaching like I do as a former AD and head football coach. So then this guy, like I said, his experience came all the way at the bottom, 1/8 of his page, before I find out any of his experience. Don't do that on your resumes, okay? All right. Oh, gosh, this guy's resume here. Here's what it says. Coaching competencies. Coaching competencies should not go on your resume. That's part of your portfolio. So listen, he takes up all this room. Offense, offensive line play, and then a bullet point. Run game, stance, movement, landmarks, demeanor, drive blocks, reach blocks, cutoff blocks, down blocks, skip pulls, square pulls, double teams. Pass game, drop back, pass protection, 3-step protection, slide protection, screen blocking, cut blocks. New bullet point, tight ends and receiver play. New bullet point, alignment, stance, release, route landmarks, break points, on and on and on. Personnel packaging, new bullet point, red zone efficiency, new bullet point, scheme. And then he lists all these schemes, run game, inside, outside. Folks, all that hubbub is a big old waste. That goes into your portfolio, okay? Not onto your resume. That's way too much bull crap to read through, okay? So, those are some couple ideas on your resume, okay? A couple ideas on your resume, and on how to reach out to a school. So, I hope I helped you here. On a future podcast, we will talk about 6 things a resume an athletic director looks for specifically. On my next podcast, we're going to hit on the 6 things an athletic director looks for on that resume specifically. All right? I'm going to share with you some insight. But hey, thanks for listening to the Coach's Locker podcast. Really appreciate it. Please go check out the footballcoachingpodcast.com. Again, that's footballcoachingpodcast.com. Okay, we've got a great lineup of speakers on there. We have the Coach's Locker podcast, which is this one. We have the Football Coaching Podcast, okay, by Joe Daniel. We have the JD Football Quick Clinic. Those are really cool, like 15, 20-minute quick clinic podcasts, some 10 minutes. We have the Pro Style Spread Offense by Jason Honstadt. again, we've got the Talking Football with Coach McKee. Okay, so there's some great podcasts. Check it out. Footballcoachingpodcast.com is a tremendous place for all these different football coaching podcasts. Okay, and then you can find my podcast home with all my show notes and everything. 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Follow me on Twitter if you don't. I'm at Coach Fore, at COACHFORE. Folks, thanks for listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore.